So for the starter, I was wrong about the bottom bolt. It is a 17 millimeter head, which is the lower one. Goes right in here, because that goes the whole way through. Next, I'm going to take off these two, it's like 12 millimeter bolts right here for the slave cylinder. Then we'll have this area pretty much cleared out. So we have the slave cylinder out, and I just took it and just swung it around. I think on this Honda it's whole one assembly, because this is plastic. There's nowhere for this to thread in like a normal clutch line would. So you can just swing that around. There's the two mounting bolts. There is a bracket it mounts on, but it's just easier to get in there from the top rather than the side. It does mount to the transmission. Maybe we'll take it off, because it looks like it might not clear the subframe when we go to drop it down. So I'm going to go ahead and take that bracket off, that way it doesn't get in the way, you know, when I'm trying to lower the transmission and have no leverage to loosen the bolts. So take the two 12 millimeter bolts off, take the slave cylinder out, and then go from the side. You can see it right here and one right here. We'll take those off, get that bracket out of the way. So when we go to drop the transmission, it's not in our way. So that bracket's off. Look how much more room we have now. It's like an inch, maybe 30 millimeters. So now I'm going to go ahead and take off this 10 mil and that 10 mil. This 10 mil bolt is holding this bracket for the clutch line. So I'm going to take that off, and that goes back here. This is the shifter assembly. So that linkage right there, and where's the other one? Right here. So this one and this one, they connect to the shift knob, and depending on which gear you're going, they're going to move into different positions. So I'm going to take this 10 off and that 10 off, and that will give us some room. Alright, so after looking at this transmission mount, I'm going to go ahead and take it off, because it's the only thing that's holding the transmission up. Normally, or sometimes, the motor mount isn't here, or it doesn't really support much. It's more of like a stabilizer type mount. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the transmission mount, because this motor mount will still hold everything up. So I'll just take it off. And there's also a motor mount up front, and there is one in the back of these. I did do a subframe on this car a couple months ago, so I know there's a mount on the back of this. So when I go to take this transmission mount off, it's not going to affect anything as far as the motor or transmission dropping out of the bottom of it. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off. This one's a 17 millimeter bolt that goes all the way through, and there's a threaded nut on the back that you don't need to hold, because it's part of the mount assembly. So I'll go ahead and take this off, take these off, just get everything out of the way, make more room for us when we go to take this off. Alright, so we have this motor mount off. There's a 17 millimeter nut there, and there. And then there's a bolt here, and right here. So there's three. So I took the long, long one off the center. And then I took 1, 2, 3. Then after that I took the 1, 2, 3 off of that, and then it all comes off. It does drop a little bit, maybe half an inch, but nothing to worry about. So I took one of the gear selector cables off right now. There's a cotter pin on top of it, and all I did when I do that, so this is cotter pin goes on top, and then this washer that keeps it compressed for the proper bushing, and the cotter pin was like this. So you take a flathead and then just tap the flathead, and it'll slide it right out. That way you don't bend or damage anything, so that we can reuse that. And there's going to be another one on the other shift selector right here. This shift selector right here. So the first one right there, second one right there, and I believe there's another there's a cotter pin on that one as well. So we're just going to take that off and then slide that out. That way we know we're good with that. And then on to the next part. So the other one that faces vertical, I actually just pulled right out with my fingers. So then it goes cotter pin, washer, and then between the washer and the rubber isolator bushing, there's this is like a plastic nylon type bushing. That way it doesn't bind up or anything like that. So these are all the pieces. This one's a lot bigger, so you can't really mess it up with this one, and it is keyed, so it goes on a certain way when you go to put it back on. So while we're up here, I'm going to go ahead and take off 3 of the transmission bolts. There's one down below the shifting fork. There's one right here that was over top of the starter. When you go to take the starter off, you'll probably see it right here. And the tricky one, so you can see my socket right there, that's going into the bolt right there. Alright, so went ahead and took off, there's three bolts right here that hold up this bracket that hold these shifting cables. There's 3 of them, 3 bolts, 1, 2, and there's one all the way directly below this stuff here. The way I got to it was it mounts, you can kind of see it now, but that one right there. That one right there. It's a little tricky. So I ended up using, this is a 1/4" drive long ratchet with a 12mm socket. I was able to get in there. It flexes a little bit and it's just enough to break it loose. Once all 3 bolts are loose, you can move the bracket out of the way and remove the bolts. Also went ahead and took off, there's a bolt here on that stud right there that goes into the side of the transmission. It's a little this bracket here actually goes like this. So this goes on that threaded part, and then this one goes on the transmission. So right here, there, and up there, there's 3 14mm bolts and 1 17mm head bolt that hold this stiffening plate. Basically all it does is hold the or house the flywheel so nothing gets inside there. So we'll take that off because that also holds, you know, from the motor to the transmission and up on the other side. Then while you're down here, you're going to want to take, there's also another 17mm bolt right there where that hole is, and then one, and then another one right there. Those are held on by the motor mount in the back there. It's kind of hard to see, but this bracket needs to be removed in order to take the transmission down. So next time we're working on from the top is to remove this bolt here so I can take this bracket off. Once that's done, we can take the axles out and then lower the transmission. So make sure when you guys take that mount in the back that you support the engine somehow. Here I have a 4x4 that I cut to length to rest on the oil pan right there. It's just to support the engine so it doesn't come falling down on you. It's just a good way to keep the engine supported. Alright, so we took that bolt out right there. It's only 17 millimeter. On the back side there's a 19 millimeter nut that's welded onto the bracket. So you only need a 17 millimeter socket on a ratchet to be able to get that. Not that stud there, but right there in that hole, you'll see it. So first thing we're going to do is take this axle nut off. It's a 36 millimeter. I already have it ready on my gun. It's the best way to do it, a gun, just because if you have a bar, like a breaker bar, you already have the car in the air, it's going to be a pain to try to get it off. You'll have to use like get a pry bar, kind of go like this to counter the pull on it. I've seen it go this way, and it's just a lot of hassle to try to get it off. You don't need a snap-on gun or anything. It's just what I've had from working on cars, but and just like that. We'll go to the other side. Take this. Literally recorded that, and I have one hand on my phone and the other hand my gun. It's how easy it is. You didn't break a sweat. So next we'll take off the next arm. So after you take the axle nut off, 36 mil axle nut, you're going to want to take this 18 millimeter nut off. See if it will focus. 18 millimeter nut off the lower control arm. There's a lower control arm here, but right here is the knuckle. This is the part of the knuckle. So now we're gonna, I use my gun for this, it's a lot easier. Sometimes if you use a ratchet and spin it, the actual ball and the ball joint will start to spin with it. It'll just spin forever. You have to use like, sometimes what I use is vice grips, like a thin pair, and grip it in there. You tend to damage the boot once you do, but that's why I like to use a gun. Just zip it right off. A lot of times you have to use a hammer to unfreeze this. Some people have ball joint splitters. I don't have any with me, but what they'll do is like a fork up here, you'll put it in there, and then the other leg comes in here, and you have a threaded nut over here, and you tighten that. As you tighten it, it compresses and it just pushes them together, but we're not that fancy. So an easy thing to do is turn the steering wheel one way or another to expose whichever way you swing your hammer. We're just going to swing at this. Try not to hit this because you'll damage the threads, but we're going to swing at this until it frees up. That way we'll be able to bring this control arm down, get the knuckle out of here. So here we're on the driver's side. One thing you're going to want to do, this is the tie rod. It's an 18 millimeter nut as well. We're going to want to take that off and then give it a couple taps. This one came right out. And then now the tie rod's off, we can just turn this any which way we want. What we're going to do is turn it this way. We're going to smack right here a couple times, turn it around. Once we're done getting this loose, I don't know if you can see up in there or not. Looks like that one's missing a bolt. But on the driver's side, there's a bracket that holds the axle because it's so much longer. You can see back there, it goes into the differential. So once we're off, we're going to have to take off. This bolt's already out, but on the other side and then down below, there's some bolts we'll take off. That will allow us to pull the axle right out. Then we'll get the axle out on the other side, and then we'll get the jack underneath the transmission and lower the transmission down. So normally I'll get a pry bar, one that has a end on it, and I'll go up in here. This one slid right out, but I'll go in here and either pry it or hammer it and once you hammer into it, it pushes it out. So